This is a weird video to be the first one in my new setup. I got new bookshelves. But we're gonna do it. I've been thinking about how to do this review for a long time. I feel like it inevitably has to get kind of personal, which I'm trying to avoid, but also I really want to gush about this book and about how stupid I am. We are here today to discuss my new favorite book of the year. There is still time for it to get bumped, and honestly I might reread it. But that book is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherynne and Valente. Now, if you've read this book, there are immediately flashing lights happening at you as to why this is a difficult book to discuss. So I am going to have a non-spoiler section here at the beginning, and then we'll talk about spoilers. Because this book is tiny. It's 200 pages? Oh no. It's 103 pages, yeah. So if you have any interest at all in this book, the audiobook is under 2 hours. That's actually how I did it. I highly recommend. Without giving anything away, this book is about Sophia, who lives in Arcadia Gardens, and she's just super in love with her husband. On the first page in the description is "I was made for him." The blurb on the top is "Everything is perfect." So obviously things are not as perfect as they appear to be. And part of the problem with this too, this is not a spoiler for anything, I know it's going to sound like it is, but it's not, is this is a very Stepford Wives kind of story. And I had just seen Don't Worry Darling, which is also just a Stepford Wives kind of story. They're not the same, but like it is very much built on this idyllic community. Something weird is going on. So I thought I had a handle on what this book was going to be, and then I definitely didn't. The reveal in here shocked me. In retrospect, it is extremely obvious, and I am an idiot for not catching it. But that is probably part of the reason why this blew me away so much. In addition to that, there is just the writing. The first thing that made me think, oh, this is going to be it for me, is this line on page 29. This is just someone asking Sophia if she's happy. She doesn't understand. She has never considered it. It is possible to be so entirely happy you never ask the question. She is a full glass submerged in water, neither nor both empty and full. Like, the imagery of that is stunning, and just the claustrophobic feeling that you get from it, that is peak writing right there. Let's put this down so I can not hold it. Look at the theming with the vines. All excellent. So yeah, if that quote did anything for you, this is technically horror, though there's no like body horror, suspenseful, shall we say. This is very much horror for beginners. If you have any interest, it's itty bitty. It is worth your time. Now we're gonna get into spoilers and talk about why this is my favorite book, because that leans sort of personal. Let me give you a recap of my memory of this book and what was happening. So it starts and I'm like, great, we're doing Stepford Wives, got it. These women are repressed in some way. There's something spooky going on. There's an implication that our main character's husband had a previous wife that he's not telling her about. And also her husband is unnamed for most of the book. I have to fix this, it's gonna bug me. There's gonna be some sort of twist. I got you. And there are all of these inserts in between the chapters that are from the, what do you call it? HOA of Arcadia Gardens, being like, there are rules here, everything has to be lined up right, white picket fence, only 2 residents per household. Great. And then I become stupid, because there's a scene where Sophia is hanging out with a bunch of other women. I'm just gonna pull it out, it'll be easier this way. We've got Mrs. Mink, Mrs. Lion, Mrs. Fish is the other one in this conversation, and you're like, those names are kind of weird, but like, whatever. Great, she's hanging out with them, and they're talking about how she found this thing that she thinks belongs to her husband's previous wife. There's then a play that is done in the center of town that is very spooky and presumably about Sophia and her husband. And Mrs. Lion approaches her after and is like, do you understand? And she's like, nah, nothing. And I'm like, me either, girl. I have no idea what's going on. And then Sophia knows that there's like something spooky in the basement. She finds a severed finger and she's like, great, this is too much for me, I'm leaving. And so she leaves, and the whole thing is surrounded in desert, which I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's like an isolating thing, because in Don't Worry Darling, this isn't a spoiler for Don't Worry Darling, they are in the desert and like there's nothing around for miles. So it's just a way to like keep the women controlled. It's a very like standard trope kind of thing. Don't think anything more of it. There's also a lot of clues about what's happening from the HOA. I have to find my favorite ones. Tranquility hours are strictly enforced after 10 p.m. and all day Sunday. Suffering of any kind is and shall be considered contraband. And then, of course, the big kicker, I'm still not picking up on what's going on after reading this, but in the chapter Opal, side note, all of the chapters are named after apples. Doesn't clue into me. So rule 22 is the fruit-bearing tree located beside the eastern gate is for decoration only and its issue is not safe to eat. Residents are encouraged to partake of all other orchards and groves within the bounds of the clearly marked parks, gardens, or Arcadia Gardens infrastructure. Consummation of the issue of said tree shall constitute a gross violation of this agreement and render it null and void. Basically, you get kicked out of Arcadia Gardens if you eat from the tree. Still not clicking. Finally, Sophia goes outside and runs into this guy and he's like making her deal and he's like, they don't want me in there. He's described as having some snaky features and is like, hey, why don't you eat this fruit and bring it back to your husband? The whole thing is the Garden of Eden. The whole thing is a commentary on how Eve is treated. It's playing with a lot of the ideas presented in the Bible, but like it also is a really compelling story. So the reason that this all hit so hard for me is that I grew up in a Christian household going to church. I know all the Bible-y stuff related to this. Apparently not enough to pick up on it, but whatever. But I am not religious now. I am not tied to any of these stories, and I am actually very interested in deconstructions of biblical texts. I feel like I'm actually a lot more interested in the Bible now that I'm outside of the church than I was inside of it. So this is something that hits really personal for me, and I think hits on my big problem with Christianity even while I was in the church, which is how it treats women. Obviously, lots of issues. Generally, I am very in favor of religion. Do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. But it's very clear that Christianity harms women. That was something I was very aware of while I was in it. And I think that this book does such a good job of cutting to the heart of the issue. There is this heartbreaking moment at the end after Sophia confronts Adam, and Adam is basically, oh yeah, her husband's name is Adam because it is, and he's explaining like everything is very biblical here. The idea with this book is that Sophia is in a long line of attempts to make the perfect woman for Adam. One of them they created out of an ear, one of them they created out of a collarbone, and they're just trying to perfect the woman. And they get to this part where she says, your father is my father too. He made me too. And Adam agrees. And Sophia says, oh, it's tough. Why am I emotional? Sophia says, why doesn't he love me like he loves you? Why does he let you do this? Why won't he tell you to stop? I can't say it anymore. Like, he is my father, but he doesn't love me the way that he loves you. And I think that stripping out all of the rules that Christianity has, all of the workarounds that you can say about like men and women are different but equal and like everyone has their role, blah 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 blah, just cutting to why doesn't he love me the way that he loves you is so brilliant to me. I don't feel like I have a better argument than that single line. And of course the end of the story is Sophia is killed and Adam makes a new wife out of a rib bone and her name is Eve. It hits so hard in the best way. Oh, and the basement is full of the bodies of all of the other women, because of course it is. And Mrs. Lion and Mrs. Fish, they're just straight up lions and fishes. It's a brilliant book. It's the emotional impact that that ending has for me. It is mostly a commentary on how the Bible affects women, which is something I'm obviously very invested in personally. But it's a brilliantly written book, and the fact that, like, obviously I'm stupid for not picking up on that twist, but I wonder how many people did pick up on it, how many people have a surface level understanding of the Bible that like it only really hit them within those last couple of pages. This is something that I feel like if I'm ever gonna do a 2-hour long video essay, it's gonna be on this thing, figuring out all of the biblical references in it. Like, this is such a rich text for being so absolutely tiny. And the fact that I can reread it in a single sitting is so gratifying to me. Like, I never reread, but this is definitely something that I'm going to. And of course I've spoiled it, but the writing in here is absolutely incredible, and the plotting is incredible, and there's so many little nuggets to pick up on this that I think you will get a new experience out of it every time that you read it. And this is the first book that I read from Catherynne and Valente, so of course I went and looked at everything else that she's done. And she's written this book called Space Opera that I remember seeing everywhere when it came out, and I kept being drawn to it, but I was like, it doesn't really seem like my thing. Eurovision in space, it got pretty low ratings, and now I'm like, oh, it's going to be the best book ever because it's Catherynne and Valente, and I trust her completely. I think the thing that is so great about this book for me is that it is not biblically accurate, but it is so close to it that it almost doesn't matter. Like, this is such an understandable position based on the reading of the Bible that this makes sense. This makes so much sense. The book is called Comfort Me with Apples, which, like, of course I never clued in on. I'm unclear on the exact title, if you know, because this feels like it should be a very specific biblical reference, other than just the apple, which we all know isn't an apple, it's just a fruit. And actually, I started reading Babel this morning. This is just a dust jacket, which actually mentioned that the word in Latin for apple is the same as the word in Latin for bad, minus some umlauts or something, which makes a lot of sense. And I just love that everything, it's all coming together. So yeah, this is a very special book to me. I think it is beautifully done. I think having it be 100 pages is the perfect length. I think that Sophia isn't necessarily super compelling as a character, but that's because she's made to be perfect. She's perfect. She has her suspicions, but is also basically a newborn baby because who knows how many of these Adam has gone through. Oh, and I forgot about this. They actually say, Adam says that Father said he made you incapable of unhappiness. The commentary, it's stunning in this book. Of course, it's not going to be for everybody. And even if this is a religious ideal that you hold to, I think that it does such a good job of cutting to the heart of the issue, which is how women are affected by Christianity from the very beginning. It's funny because I've thought about putting in a warning for, like, if you are religious you might be offended, but I think that this is biblically accurate enough, and the authors clearly spent enough time thinking about how to incorporate the story that it's not sacrilegious. It's an interpretation of the texts that we have and using them. Like, I don't think this book says anything that the Bible doesn't say. It just says it in a different way that makes people angry, which again is so much of the brilliance of it. It's got just enough horror in it to be spooky, which I've been loving horror this year, so this is the #1 book right now for me, and there's always a chance that it'll get bumped, but that'll be tough to do. And I love a twist in a book which is barely a twist. Like, for you, this might have been super obvious. Like, it's screaming at you from the title, it's screaming at you from the prologue, it's screaming at you from the first chapter, it's screaming at you from the description, and it still caught me off guard. But knowing the twist still doesn't detract from the book. Like, I don't even know if it's meant to be a twist, but it was kind of best case scenario for me, because being able to pull that off, like, my jaw was on the floor. Anyway, that's it for my very long, very rambly review of this book. I'm sure you will be seeing it later. You'll see it in my wrap-up. And I wanted to do this video because this book is so impossible to talk about. I need a place where all of my thoughts are relatively succinct. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you have read Comfort Me with Apples, please let me know what you thought of it. Even your spoilery thoughts, just mark them as spoilers in the comments below so that everybody can enjoy this book if they want to. All right, Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.